everyone, it's Fitz with the Deep Purple. That's right, we have our new expanded version of the daily delivery, and we'll do these on occasion, maybe weekly, I'm not sure. If you're familiar with Deep Purple, you're a long-time GoPowercat subscriber. Thank you very much for being that veteran of GPC. We did a show 15, maybe more years ago called Deep Purple. We had a great studio in our Aggieville offices. It was the old Varsity Theater, so we had theater lighting, and we built a set. Shane Howard and I would host it, break down stuff, whatever it was, the topic of the day. A 30-minute show. We did it weekly. And then Shane and Ryan Wallace, who was a student assistant at that time with our video department, spent all night in post-production putting together the video. It was pretty incredible. What they did to turn it around was all-nighters on a weekly basis. And it eventually became just not worth it anymore. It was too much effort. But I got older and technology got better, and here we are. I can do it all now here in my home studio with ring lighting, with microphones, and with a great app called StreamYard that allows me to do all of the stuff we had to do in post live right here with my laptop right in front of me. It's pretty amazing. But Deep Purple will take on topics more in depth. The DDs are meant to be 3 minutes. That's kind of what the sweet spot is for short attention span viewers, which I admit I am too. But Deep Purple will go, well, deeper. That's the whole point. And today we're going to delve into our first topic for Deep Purple. What happens if the Big 12 ends up with 16 members and has to schedule football with 16 members? How does that take place? And I'm going to show you with lots of charts and maps how beautiful it can be, how simple it can be, and how with 16 schools, 16 football programs, you should be able to play every member in a 4-year period, home and away. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And I want to put up front right now, this is a hypothetical. I am not saying Arizona, Colorado, and San Diego State will be in the Big 12. I'm just not saying that. Oh, and UConn. I'm saying that's the latest I've been told. Those are the programs that Brett Yormark is targeting. It certainly could change. We could see a Utah or a Arizona State move in instead of San Diego State. But it seems like Brett Yormark is focused on UConn out east and then 3 teams out west. Why is that? Well, he has 3 teams out east in the new Big 12, which we'll cover. Of course, you know who that is. And BYU, 1 school out west. This would give him 4 east, 4 west, and 8 there in the heart of Big 12 territory. But 4 in Texas and 4 in what I'll call the plains here, which is the old Big 8. It's an interesting thing to try to lay this out, and I think I found a way to do it fairly simple. But first, let's do a little history lesson as I bring up our first map. The original Big 12. Wasn't it beautiful? It was all connected, had rivalries. And, of course, the Big 12 came to being when the Big 8 and 4 schools from Texas merged. It was not an expansion of the Big 8. The Big 8 is now a defunct conference that those records all sit in a vault somewhere, along with the Southwest Conference records. The Big 12 is a new conference. But for those of us who covered the Big 8, we know that it started as the Big 6, then the Big 7, and Big 8. So the Big 12, even though a new conference, feels like an extension of it. And it did. And it worked for a while. But eventually, schools grew tired of Texas. And Texas always had to have its way. After all, Texas is one of the biggest athletic departments in the country, and Texas deserved to have its way in a lot of things, but it got a little too much for some schools. First to leave were Nebraska to the Big 10 and Colorado to the Pac-12, quickly followed by Missouri and Texas A&M to the SEC. And 1996 turned into what we had in 2012 and beyond when West Virginia came in and TCU joined. Now the Big 12 was 10 because Texas blocked the addition of 2 more schools, thought to be Cincinnati and Louisville. They had a nice little pocket of schools there out east, but Texas worried about losing voting control of the conference that it, frankly, has always gotten its way in. Then we found out that Texas and Oklahoma were also leaving. They were going to head to the SEC, and that was finally negotiated to be following this athletic season coming up. So in 2023 in football, as you know, there will be 14 schools playing football, but then it'll become 12 in the following year. And that is the 12. They added BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and back down in Texas, Houston. So that's a scattered mess. I mean, we all recognize that. And maybe, just maybe, it'll only be 1 year of a mess. As I reported not too long ago with the daily delivery, it would appear that your mark is focused in on Colorado, Arizona, and San Diego State, and UConn. And if that happens, the conference in 25 would look like this. That makes a little bit more sense, even though Connecticut is way up there, that little dot of red, and UCF is way down there. At least you've got some partitions here of the conference that make a little bit of sense. So it divides out very easily if those are the four they add, or four at least in those same regions, because you end up with these groupings. You end up with 4 teams in the East in the orange, 4 teams in Texas in the yellow, 4 teams out west with Colorado, BYU, Arizona, and San Diego State in this possibility in blue. And then the old Big 8 buddies, Iowa State, KU, K-State, Oklahoma State, right there in green. Now, I know some people wince when I call them pods. Some people have a bad reaction to the name pods, but they're essentially scheduling partners. You have so much in similar with these other teams in the conference that you're going to play them home and away in 2-year periods. You're going to play them every year. So Kansas State will, in football, constantly play every year KU, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. The teams out west will play each other every year, East every year, and Texas every year. And these are your pods. This is what it looks like, and now you see why I color-coded them so you can follow along here a little bit better. Those 4 pods make a lot of sense. Let's just call them scheduling groupings, because they'll never show up in any standings like this. If they want to play like trophies, have the old wooden shoe, I don't know, is that a thing, for the winner of the Eastern Pod, that's fine. There will be 16 teams in one conference set of standings. The top 2 will play in the Big 12 title game. But to get there, you got to get through a 9-game conference schedule. And as I mentioned, if you're Kansas State, and I'll be covering this from Kansas State because that's a school I cover, this is the start of your schedule. You'll play these 3 teams every year in your grouping, and that's good. You need to keep those rivalries alive. You can't have them skipping out on the teams that are most closely bonded with you, but also most closely associated in geography. Now, to get to 9 conference games, it's easy. You just play 2 in each of the other groupings. And hypothetically, this would be the 9 teams, Kansas State at top there, the 9 teams below them, that would be in their schedule for a 2-year roll through. You'd go to Baylor 1 year and TCU would come to Manhattan, and the next year TCU comes to Manhattan and you go to Baylor. Or did I do that backwards? But you know what I mean. And the good thing about this is if you're an East or a West school, you will only play 2 East or West schools of the opposite a year and only 1 on the road. You will only make 1 long trip a year, and you can schedule that around Thursday night games with open dates before. There are ways to do that to minimize the damage of traveling. So after a 2-year period and you've played those 6 teams from the other divisions, you pick up the other 6 for a 2-year period, home and away. And now, in a 4-year period, you have played everyone in your conference. It's something so simple and elegant that the SEC passed on, and frankly, I'll be rather upset if the Big 12 ends up to be the Big 16 or whatever they call themselves with 16 football members, and they do anything but this, because everything else gets more complicated than the simplicity of this. But there is one wrinkle you could throw in. Kansas State has a pretty good thing going with TCU, and I am very intrigued by the Baylor-BYU possible rivalry. And I don't know who West Virginia considers to be their rivals in those two other pods of what are now the Big 12, but let's say Iowa State and, I don't know, Texas Tech. They would play those teams every year. And instead of having a 4-year rotation, you would complete the cycle in 6 years. I've selected these 3 schools outside of the old Big 8 pod, the Plains pod, to be Kansas State's annual rivals, meaning you not only will play the 3 teams in your pod every year, you'll play these 3 teams every year, at least through the 6-year cycle. Maybe K-State Cincinnati doesn't really gain any heat, any rivalry to it, and another one doesn't, so you just shuffle them around at the end of the 6 years. But then every 2 years, you play one of the 3 teams left over in each of the pods. And you end up in a 6-year cycle playing everyone while creating rivalries across different time zones and different regions. It's pretty simple scheduling in reality, but we'll see if the Big 12 actually does it. I'm not sure if there's going to be another round of expansion. I keep thinking it'll be here pretty soon. And it hasn't been. It hasn't been even close to that because the Pac-12 keeps kicking the media rights deal can down the road, and they're running out of road. We'll probably expect to hear something by the end of June, and maybe that will be nothing. There will be no expansion in this round. But we'll see what percolates out there with the Pac-12, and once the schools kind of figure what's going on, then we'll see some movement. Maybe no movement. Maybe it'll be such a good contract, everyone will stay put. And basketball, you wondering about basketball? Oh, it's just beautiful. If you're Kansas State, you will play KU, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State home and away every basketball season. There's 12 other teams in the conference, and you'll play them once, getting to 18 games in a basketball season. That's it. It's simple. It's beautiful. And I hope if the Big 12 goes to 16, they'll look at this. And now you understand a little bit better why they're not just looking at 4 more schools out west, because it kind of gets them out of balance. Sure, you could move Colorado into the old Big 8 pod and Iowa State to the east or Houston to the east. It just gets really sticky at that point. They like UConn for many reasons, but they want a team out west, a school out east. And it appears to be the one that checks the most boxes. Personally, I would add USF. Have nice rivalry with UCF. They're just voted to build a stadium, but they don't have the basketball. And the basketball play is really important to Brett Yormark. And we'll have more on that in the future. But that, my friends, is the first Deep Purple, and that's how you schedule, with 16 schools in a conference and play everyone in a 4-year cycle. Is this thing working? I hope the SEC's listening.